I was incarcerated pre-trial for 2 months.
2 months?
3 months.
1.5 years.
Simply because I couldn't afford to pay $1,500.
$5,000.
$7,500.
$25,000.
I lost my home.
I nearly lost my son.
I lost my business.
I almost took a plea that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Not because of a conviction,
but because of an accusation.
Our stories are unfortunately not unique.
They are all too normal.
Every year, more than 250,000 people pass through Illinois' jails.
250,000 people.
But we can stop this injustice today.
Let's restore the presumption of innocence.
Let's allow hundreds of thousands of people per year to stay in their communities.
Working.
Taking care of their families.
And accessing services while awaiting trial.
Let's end money bail.
Let's end money bail.
Let's end money bail.
Let's end money bail.
And bring our people home.
Across Illinois.
Good afternoon, everybody.
It's evening.
Good evening. It's evening now. Oh my God. My name is Sharon Mitchell Jr. I got my tag team partner. What's your name? I've never met you before.
I am Adrian Davis. I am with Soul, also known as Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation. Sharon, where are you from?
I am from the South Side of Chicago, and I'm also from an organization called the Illinois Justice Project. And we are here today as a part of the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice. Tonight, we're going to be joined from organizers from all across the state of Illinois to talk about the Pretrial Fairness Act. Adrian, tell me what the Pretrial Fairness Act does.
So,
Yeah.
so the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice launched in the summer of 2019. The network is composed of more than 30 organizations from across the state of Illinois, representing 9 different counties and several statewide organizations and networks. Members stretch from Carbondale to Waukegan and from Rockford to Champaign.
Yeah. And we're here to talk about the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is a bill that will end money bond and dramatically reduce the number of people incarcerated throughout the state. So we gave you some background on what the network is, and we thank you for joining us today. And now we're going to talk a little bit about why pretrial freedom matters. And from my experience, I used to be a public defender, and I've talked to so many other folks that are caught up in the justice system, and they all say the same thing. They talk about how pretrial incarceration, that is people going to jail before they've been proven anything. It matters because incarcerated people, when they're in jail before their trial, it makes it harder for them to actually seek justice. They can't meet with their lawyers. They can't meet with the folks involved with their case. And we know from studies all across the country that people in jail are more likely to be convicted of a crime, more likely to serve longer sentences than those who have their freedom awaiting trial. We also know that there are personal pressures. People lose their jobs, people lose connection with their families, and people are just way worse off. That's why people who are actually incarcerated are more likely to be rearrested. So when we're talking about justice, when we're talking about public safety, overuse of pretrial incarceration is bad for everybody in Illinois.
So across the country, communities are, no doubt waking up to the unnecessary harms caused by our pretrial justice system, which should also be coupled with this conversation that we're having around defunding police. Several jurisdictions have eliminated monetary bail or greatly reduced its use, including Cook County right here in Illinois. Notably, this has been done without endangering community safety, and in some instances coincided with an overall reduction in crime. Sharon, tell us how that system, the current works.
Yeah, so after police make an arrest, essentially a decision is made. Uh, Prosecutors essentially have to prove all felony charges. And unless somebody is released directly from police custody, they go before a judge. And there, a judge has to make a decision about what's going to happen to the person. People who people can either really get one of three outcomes. The first outcome is the person is released on their own recognizance. They call it an I bond. The second outcome is a person can be denied bond, basically saying that you can't be released. No, nothing can happen. You're going to stay in jail until your case is resolved. And the third is a money bond. That is basically the system saying you're eligible for release, but unless you have money, enough money, you're going to stay in jail. And we know that there are lots of folks out there who don't have the money to be released. So really what we're talking about is punishing people pre-trial, not because the judge is saying that they're too risky to be released or anything, just because they are poor. And that's just not right. So with the Pretrial Fairness Act, what we're trying to do is we're trying to basically stop people from being held incarcerated because they're poor. And we're trying to fix all the systems in the justice system where people are pleading just because they're incarcerated pre-trial, not because they think they're guilty. It's a real problem that we see in courtrooms all across the state of Illinois. So what the Pretrial Fairness Act will essentially do is that it will essentially restore the presumption of fairness with a presumption of pretrial release. The bill ensures that people who are facing less serious charges are released on their own recognizance, and that the only people who are facing the most serious charges are even eligible for pretrial detention. Currently in Illinois, every single person, whatever their charge is, can be eligible for pretrial incarceration. And that is one of the reasons why the jail population has really spiraled out of control and the prison population has spiraled out of control. You can't talk about mass incarceration or wrongful convictions without talking about what we do in the pretrial system. Also, since we know that since we're limiting the amount of people that will be actually detained, we know that less people will actually have to go to jail. And we also know that the Pretrial Fairness Act will actually increase the standard in courts that prosecutors must meet before someone can be incarcerated. These measures, again, will dramatically increase the amount of people that are going to be detained in Illinois pretrial.
So the Pretrial Fairness Act will completely abolish the use of money bond in the state of Illinois. Wealth-based pretrial incarceration will become a thing of the past, and people will only be jailed after a robust, individualized hearing that reflects the seriousness of the bond decision. That is exciting because no longer will the size of a person's bank account determine whether or not they will walk free or be caged while fighting their case. Studies show that some of the worst impacts of jail happen after the first 24 hours, including the increases of future rearrest and missed court dates, which makes sense, right? Because most people only get one no call, no show at work before they're going to be fired. I know that would certainly be the case with me. This means it's super important to get people out of custody as fast as possible before their lives are destabilized, right? Before any of those impacts start to happen. Under the Pretrial Fairness Act, a majority of people arrested would be eligible for release directly from police custody. So that means they would not be held for over and up to 72 hours before seeing a judge, but instead would be given a court date to come back to in the future.
Thanks, Olivia. So I'll talk a little bit about supportive services. People need resources rather than surveillance and monitoring. And right now, most pretrial conditions are punitive and create a higher likelihood that a person will be reincarcerated while fighting their case. And these conditions create rules that people cannot succeed under, and the more rules applied, the more likely somebody is to fail to meet them all. So the pretrial justice system that we built together should ensure people receive real supportive services while they're fighting their cases. This means providing what people need to get to court, like bus passes or Uber rides, having flexible court dates, or even the option to reschedule court dates, and to be able to connect people with voluntary social services in the community. And accessing those services must not become a condition of release that people are punished for not doing. We don't want pretrial services to become a way that the courts get control over more parts of people's lives, such as their health care, their child care, education, even their jobs. And we know that current pretrial practices are harming people across the state. We don't have very good information about what exactly is happening in all of Illinois' 102 counties. What's happening in bond hearings across the state is not currently being tracked. And that means there's no meaningful oversight as to whether people's rights are being violated, or even who's in jail and why they're there. So the Pretrial Fairness Act will require counties across the state to act and publicly release on what's happening in courtrooms and jails across Illinois. And when the bill passes, this provision will be essential to ensuring that reforms are properly implemented. It's what will allow us to ensure that fewer people are jailed and that counties don't just replace money bond and incarceration in jail with incarceration at home on EM or electronic monitoring or other punitive conditions.
Currently, missing a court date means reincarceration. And this policy provides no incentive for a person to return to court if they've made an honest mistake, like forgetting the date, or just encountering a barrier to getting there, like a car accident, a breakdown, or missing the bus. So the Pretrial Fairness Act will require that courts give people who missed a court date notice and a 48-hour window to come in before issuing a warrant. So in some jurisdictions, felony cases may take a year or more to resolve. That means traveling back and forth to court, rescheduling work and other commitments once a month for over a year. The chances that someone will make a mistake or find themselves choosing between keeping their job and making it to court at some point in that time are really high. So people want to do the right thing. They want to come to court, but they face real barriers. So allowing people who just missed a court date to come in will make the courts more efficient and help prevent people from being jailed over simple mistakes or access barriers caused by poverty. But let's talk a little bit about what we're up against. So there are a lot of people talking about bail reform right now, but we don't all mean the same thing. Reforming our pretrial justice system gives us the opportunity to dramatically reduce the number of people in Illinois jails and prisons. But if not done properly, it could lead to the exact opposite. So we're going to spend a little time talking about things that we're trying to guard against in the legislative process. Risk assessment tools, false alternatives to incarceration like electronic monitoring, and exceptions that leave people out of reforms.
So now it's time to talk about risk assessment tools. So risk assessment tools are already permitted in Illinois law and already are used in several counties. They are used by people in the system to make progress away from money bond. But we really have a lot of concern about these risk assessment tools. But we don't think that we could actually remove them from the system in Illinois. So what we do with the Pretrial Fairness Act is try to limit the harm that they present. We try to create new protections for people against risk assessment harms by giving their counsel the ability to understand what's behind risk assessment tools and basically giving folks information about what's being used and what's being fed into the risk assessment tools. With that said, we know that they're problematic. We know that they're racist, and there are people that are really trying to fight against their use. One of the biggest things that we can work on, though, is removing the importance of these risk assessment tools within the system. And there are certainly jurisdictions like California, in their bill, SB 10, that allows risk assessment tools to be used in all decisions for all types of charges. We can't let that happen in Illinois, and we're certainly fighting it. We know that folks lives are too important to be determined by an algorithm. The Pretrial Fairness Act actually works against that, and it prevents risk assessment from being the sole basis for determining incarceration decisions. So we know that there are many false alternatives to incarceration that are being offered up as a response to reform in the pretrial justice system. We know that electronic monitoring is not an alternative to incarceration. Electronic monitoring in people's homes moves the jails from our communities into the homes and turns rooms into cells.
The Pretrial Fairness Act doesn't totally eliminate the use of electronic monitoring for people awaiting trial. But what it does do is introduce some really important protections for anybody that may end up getting placed on EM. The Pretrial Fairness Act guarantees that anybody who's subjected to house arrest or electronic monitoring in Illinois receives credit for the time that they are on electronic monitoring. Currently in Illinois, there are people who are locked in their own homes and don't actually receive credit for that time. It also would reduce the penalty for violations on electronic monitoring. Currently, if a sheriff's department alleges that somebody's violated their electronic monitoring, not only can they be taken back to jail, but they can be charged with a entirely new felony case. Under the Pretrial Fairness Act, violations on EM would be changed to misdemeanors. Many counties in Illinois don't currently have electronic monitoring programs currently. And they may try to start them if they're unable to incarcerate people on unaffordable money bonds. And we need to be working constantly to make sure that that's not happening by educating people in our communities about the harms caused by electronic monitoring and making use of the data provisions in the Pretrial Fairness Act that'll actually allow us to monitor judicial decisions, like we were talking about earlier, to make sure that we're not seeing an expansion of those programs. And if we do, that we are organizing like hell to make sure that we do not see more people on electronic monitoring.
And I want to talk about cases involving allegations of violence. So a lot of you probably hear elected officials talking about supporting bail reform for people facing nonviolent charges, especially those with drug charges. But the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice's vision includes everyone, because we believe our society needs to move away from punitive carceral responses to harm. And so it's important that we don't leave out people who are accused of more serious things. And we know that all people are deserving of their freedom. So regardless of the accusations against them, at the foundation of our legal system is the principle that we're all supposed to be considered innocent until proven guilty. And that should apply to everyone, regardless of their access to money. So we need to wrestle with the discomfort as advocates. We need to wrestle with the discomfort we have around releasing people, and then as a society, around releasing people charged with more serious crimes, as caging them is in direct contradiction with that cornerstone principle of the presumption of innocence. Currently, we're locking people up sometimes for years at a time, simply because of an accusation, and that's destroying lives, and it tears apart communities. Today, our system treats people as if they're guilty until proven innocent, and that's not right. It's not right, and that approach is not making us safer. As Sharon touched on earlier, jailing people destabilizes their lives, and it makes it more likely that they'll be rearrested in the future, and it sets off a cycle, a vicious cycle. Jail is an isolating and violent place that further traumatizes people. We all know this. We all have heard the stories and seen the movies, and we may have people that have been directly affected by that. We know that people do not get the help that they need in jail, and that the shame, stigma, and hurt it causes can even increase the likelihood of future violence. Just because a person has been accused of a crime doesn't mean that they're a danger to their community. So the court currently has the ability to deny people pretrial release if it can be proven that that person presents a risk to community safety. And that what we found in the past is that idea of what is a risk to community safety can be very nebulous. And so while it's easy to focus on a few horror stories, the truth is that most people are not a threat to their community. Most people who find themselves caught up in the legal system, they want to They want to finish out their case. They want to not be on the radar of the state, and they want to go back to living their lives. After Cook County doubled the number of people released pretrial without paying money bond, just about half of 1% of the more than 30,000 people released in the last 2 years have been accused of committing a violent crime. Let me say that again. Half of 1% of the more than 30,000 people released in the last 2 years have been accused of committing a violent crime while out on bail. And so meanwhile, 99.4% of people are successfully and safely returned to their communities after resolving their case. The Pretrial Fairness Act ensures that judges can't just say someone is a general threat to public safety. Instead, they have to conclude that someone poses an identifiable threat to a specific person. And the evidence they consider must be clear and convincing, which is an escalation of the burden of evidence in the status quo, what we have right now. So if someone can present clear and convincing evidence that a person poses a specific threat to a specific person, then that person can then be considered to be detained. The evidence they consider must be clear and convincing, which is just a way of making sure that the proof and the standard of proof for taking away someone's freedom is higher than it is now. Because right now we don't put the proper amount of weight on that decision. And the Pretrial Fairness Act is going to help facilitate that in the future. Cool.
All right, y'all. So that was a lot of information, and thank you for bearing with us for our technical difficulties. We are working on an internal GoFundMe for Sharon's internet. So, but now we want to open it up to a panel discussion with our very own Sharon Mitchell, Flo Rencher, and State Senator Robert Peters. So my first question is for Flo. You were incarcerated for 3 months before your trial because you couldn't afford to pay money bond. How would your experience have been different if the Pretrial Fairness Act would have been in effect?
Was in effect, I would not have felt so much pressure. Just imagine, as soon as you're arrested, I'm talking about when before you even make it to the county jail, you start feeling all the pressure because the fight is fixed. The fight is fixed. And you got to go through all of the drama, the back and forth to court. You worry about your family, you worry about your job situation, your money situation, the pressures on you and your family. If everything was different, man, people's lives would be better. People could stand up for themselves a little bit better. But when you feel that everything is not going in your favor, I'm talking about even before you even get to the jail, even before you get to the county jail, man, you start feeling the pressure. And that's not right. You're supposed to be able to stand up and face what you got to face without all of that pressure, because that pressure will make you cop out. That pressure will make you say, okay, forget about it, man. I'm not going to go through all this here. Just go ahead and send me on down to the joint. And there's another conviction. And that's what they're looking for. The conviction rates, man, is so high in certain court systems, man, in Illinois, is ridiculous because this is what they do. But it's all about that pressure, man. When that pressure is what gets you. And you take that pressure away, man, your whole life would be better. It'd be different.
Yeah, one of the things that was so frustrating to me when I was working in the court system is that it wasn't about like whether somebody did it or didn't do it. I think there are real questions about even if somebody is guilty of something, the way we punish them is out ridiculous. But even putting aside that, we basically force people to plead guilty all the time. The system is built on it, and pretrial incarceration and money bond is one of the ways that where they do it. So I definitely understand that pressure. I definitely understand what you went through, Flo. And what we're trying to do here is build a system where that pressure doesn't exist, where people can actually have their constitutional rights actually valued, that if there's an allegation, they have the ability to defend themselves from that allegation. And that's really what's best. That's what people want. We want a justice system that's fair, and people have the opportunity to actually defend themselves from what are just allegations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, Flo, and thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. We appreciate that.
No, it's no problem, man. Because the thing is, though, if things was different, man, like I said before, man, a whole lot of lives would be better. A whole lot of lives would be different. It'd be better for the community. It'd be better for the family, and especially for the individual. You know, a person need a fighting chance, and when you feel that you don't have a fighting chance even before the fight starts, you know, that's absolutely ridiculous.
If Flo, you bring up a good point about family, right? One of the things I think people don't realize when they're thinking about the system is that it's family that's really being hit hardest, right? So it's family that are paying these bonds, and especially, quite frankly, Black women. We know that Black people make a vast majority of the system, outsizing their actual population. And we know it's Black women, Black mothers, Black sisters, Black churches that are really carrying that economic burden. And by paying bond, that's what we're doing. We're pulling money out of the Black community, right? And that money can go to things that actually keep people safe. Things like rent, things like education, things like food. This system is damaging not only to individuals who are in jail, but the entire family and the entire economic viability of communities.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, since we're kind of on the subject a little bit, this next question is for you, Sharon. Actually, I'm going to jump back and I'm going to welcome Senator Robert Peters. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I can't tell if I'm a little late, but I'm excited to dig in on these questions and for this conversation, and for everyone who is watching. Just I'm rambling now, so but I'm excited.
No, you're all good, but I'm going to immediately put you on the hot spot. So this question is for you. With all that's going on in Illinois, you know, the issues around policing, criminal justice reform, gun violence prevention, poverty, education, and corruption, you know, that being on the top of everyone's mind, you've prioritized ending money bond as one of your primary legislative goals. Why are you so invested in money bond?
Yeah. So I think it sort of is the intersection when we talk about, you know, racism and classism sort of coming together. And so to me, ending money bond is essentially both a economic justice fight and a criminal justice fight, sort of at that, I guess, the point, that the direct point of those two. And so to me, this is sort of a broader justice conversation about what type of world we're going to build and what it means to actually have safety in our neighborhoods, in our communities. I mean, I say this all the time. We've been practicing the same sort of form of public safety for the last 40 years, and it's failed. It's failed every time. And we have the same press conferences. People give the same stories. They give the same solutions, and it continues to fail. And what money bond does is essentially just says that you're guilty of being poor, and in America, guilty of being poor, Black, and brown. And so to me, this is an opportunity for us to indict a failed policy regime and start actually seeing our way through safety isn't locking up poor Black and brown folks, but actually investing in people and starting to change our entire system about lifting up our communities instead of pushing them down.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. My next question is for Sharon. And again, we've already kind of touched on some of this, but you know, there is no question that the criminal legal system is incredibly racist. Every day we hear stories about, you know, the effects that of that ingrained racism, whether it's on the street or in the courtroom. You know, with all that said, how can a single policy work to turn all of that around?
Yeah, no, there's no single, you know, bill, act, law that's going to turn the criminal justice system around. There's no doubt that doesn't exist. But what we do know is there are structures in the criminal legal system that exist to accentuate that racism, accentuate that classism. There are things in place that force people into jail and make them take pleas. And while we can't turn around the criminal justice system with the snap of the finger, and there'll still be actors in the criminal justice system that won't have the welfare of the people in mind, we can take away the tools that people rely on for that oppression. And that's really what I think the Pretrial Fairness Act is about. It's about taking money out of the decision. It's about taking pretrial incarceration, that overuse. It's about reducing that mass incarceration, reducing those wrongful convictions, and really giving all people, no matter what their wealth is, no matter what their race is, no matter where they come from the state, the right to be proven innocent until proven guilty and defend their actual case and actually have their families with them while they're going through this tragic time and not be forced into prison. That's just something that doesn't make us safe. And like Senator Peters talked about, we all come from communities that have had their struggles, right? And too often our leaders tell us that, oh, we've got to lock people up and lock people up and lock people up to stay safe. And every day we read, I think, the failures of that, right? The failures of that. We aren't any safer. So I just thank Senator Peters for taking this on, and thank Senator Peters for his whole, I think, view about public safety. And if he could talk a little bit more, if he's already answered it, how he envisions public safety, and how we can be different and how we can fight these narratives that haven't done anything for us in the last however many years.
Yeah, I mean, I can dig in. I think the thing to me is that the way we have, when it comes to money bond or bail, it's essentially a privileged system that says that if you're rich, mostly white, mostly men, you're allowed to be free. And I think this is just a larger, broader question about what's going on systematically in our country. And to me, there's a whole lot, and I get extremely overly theoretical and nerdy and weird. But I think one of the most formative experiences for me comes out of the Great Recession. I came out of college, I couldn't find a job. Unemployment was at that time a high 10, 15%. At the same time, Black wealth fell by 53%, where white wealth that was already higher fell by 17%. And essentially then we stacked on austerity that included closing schools, closing mental health services, transitioning people from being homeowners to renters, and then having rent subsidized, private equity when it comes to housing. This is me getting really, really deep and dirty. So people are like, what is this dude doing? But we essentially had all that happen. And at the same time, though, when we look at policing and we look at incarceration, it's been relatively the same. Though Cook County Jail has shrunk, that doesn't mean the police state itself has shrunk. And so we not only have the last 30 to 40 years has policing essentially replaced any social service, it's now doubled in having to be a quote unquote social service. And that doesn't do anything for safety. And so what we're seeing now is that people have been seeing their lives constantly disrupted through multiple different parts through the state. And so I have a unique district. I have downtown and I have the south side. And folks downtown freak out about public safety, oh my God, and they think as if it's separate. What's happening in the city is going to impact folks downtown. It's going to impact folks in south side, west side neighborhoods. It's going to impact everybody. And so if Chicago is not made whole, if investment is not made whole, if we don't actually see a radical redistribution of resources and money, then we are not going to have the safety that we need. It is not going to come from just locking up people in mass. And considering the fact that we haven't even recovered from the Great Recession, and mind you, people weren't doing great before that to begin with, and now we've had this triple crisis. I mean, that is the public safety conversation I think everybody needs to have, and that needs to be put onto people like myself who are in elected office and should feel the pressure about our failures to provide for the common good.
Yes, that's a very good point. And actually, I want to, kind of hone in on the time right now. COVID-19 has taken the lives of, at this point, 7 people incarcerated in Cook County jail and multiple others across the state. What has this moment, and this is for the group, what has this moment taught us about COVID, county jails, and incarceration?
I mean, I can start here. Like, I think it was Representative Cam Buckner that talked about how, COVID hasn't created any real new problems. It's just magnified all the old ones we had, right? So we always knew before COVID that putting people in jail was bad. We knew that it increased the incarceration in prisons. We knew that it increased the amount of people who are falsely incarcerated, right? And we knew that exposed people to unnecessary damage in terms of being exposed to violence and being exposed to harms in jail. Well, COVID just magnified that, right? Where now you have this virus that's spreading and it's killing people both inside and outside the jail. So that violence, that harm isn't new. It just took on a bigger form, right? So we know that this bill will reduce the pretrial population. It will help us better deal with COVID. We know that one of the good things that counties did is that we reduced our jail populations in response to COVID, and that actually saved lives. I want to thank lots of the organizations that are on this call that worked in their counties and called on their sheriffs to reduce their jail. But we know that money bond and systems like this have continued to raise those populations. Every day, these populations get bigger and bigger. So that's why it's so important that we do this and so important that we tackle these problems. So COVID hasn't brought anything new. It just made things bigger and worse. And that's why we need the Pretrial Fairness Act.
Can I add something here, guys?
Absolutely.
As far as the COVID goes, like Jerome said, it just made the situation much worse. And I was speaking about that pressure before. It's just added pressure. It's just more pressure, man. It's more on your head, more on your shoulders. I wish I had an opportunity to show before and after when I was blessed by CCBF to get out of jail to fight my case, particularly. I wish I had a before and after shot to show you my confidence level when I came to court from home. I was able to put on a suit and a tie. I was groomed up real nice, and I presented myself in a better way. And on the other hand, when I was coming from the bullpens back there, oh man, the confidence level was at all-time low. I was ready to cop out. I didn't want to be there. It was just, like I say, it's like night and day. And you feel like an animal, period, And no one wants to feel like an animal while they're fighting their case. That's not no place to be. But with the COVID situation, it makes things a whole lot worse, man, across the board.
Yeah, I can jump in to say one more thing because I talked too much. I'm sorry about that, y'all. I apologize. Yeah. But one of the things that I saw when I was a public defender, I went to law school. I was born in the South Side. Like I wanted to become a lawyer. I knew the justice system was wrong. I wanted to get in and fight. I knew people, there were bad cases put on people, and that even if people did it, the way we treated how people needed to, how we treated people was bad. But I spent my entire time not talking about whether people did it or didn't do it. I didn't talk about, lots of trials or putting on evidence. It was all about plea bargaining. 95% of cases plead, right? People don't get the opportunity to actually fight their case. And part of that is this pretrial incarceration, right? So, one of the reasons why I left is because I wanted to, give my people the same rights that a rich person would, when they were in the justice system. I'll let Senator Peters talk about it because I know he really talks well about. He's really good on this. But giving everybody the rights that the Constitution gives us is something that we should be doing, especially in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that gets me is just the budgetary considerations of a public defender's office compared to the state's attorney and the sheriff's office. It's a larger question. That's like a larger thing, but the idea, for instance, like, let's see, even in things that you don't normally think about, you don't have like an eviction defense unit when it comes to a public defender's office. It's such a small, tight, like the caseload and everything. But yeah, that's just me rambling on this piece about public defenders. But I think it is interesting that we're in a moment because of COVID that is highlighting something that's long existed and is just highlighted and made it worse. The idea that this stuff is happening isn't actually that much shocking. But I think it just highlights something that has often been ignored. I mean, I grew up with four white sisters, and one of them is literally calling me right now as I'm on this. Like they called me after George Floyd, and they were like, "Oh my God!" And I love them; they're my family, but they were like totally shocked. And I, on the other hand, I wasn't in a state of shock. I think I was in a state of exhaustion. Like, here we are again. But we have a moment, and in this moment, we can make some serious change happen. It's something that we need to organize around, and we need to build on. And I think passing the Pretrial Fairness Act is a moment for us to indict a failed policy regime over the last 40 years. So that's my little spiel. I'll turn it over to you, Adrian.
So, I mean, a part of the big discussion right now is obviously defund the police. Why is this such an important part of it? And I know, we've obviously touched on it here and there, but to just kind of tie it all together with this moment that we're having right now, do you have any thoughts about, why it's particularly just as important?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say about this moment is when the Black Lives Matter protests really popped off, areas like Carlinville, Illinois, which is downstate, rural, had 1,000 people turn out. Naperville had thousands of people turn out. Aurora, Joliet. It was. I think that the struggle of this past summer is that a lot of people grab onto the "if it bleeds, it leads," sort of story around violence. But that doesn't change the fact that we have a serious issue when it comes to failed public safety, and that when it comes to the police, that they are actually just, at any moment, someone could get shot in their back and be the, quote unquote, perfect narrative for your more, suburban, downstate person, because nothing's changed. And I think it's important for us to really sort of put that pressure on folks and remind folks of why they were out in the streets in mass. And I think that this is a moment for us. I think that oftentimes, and this is me being very honest and brutal, oftentimes we look at the most righteous argument, which might do good for our base. Like, that's fair. That's great. We are able to move our base. But we are now in a period where we need to move a broader set of folks. And I think that the space we can do that in is on a public safety argument of what real safety is. And I think people will grab onto that no matter where they are. You can talk to someone in Kenilworth and tell them, what do you think is what's safe for them in Kenilworth? And they'll talk about New Trier High School. They'll talk about 150 different programs, including orchestra, the grocery store they have, the fact that they don't need to worry about paying for anything. And you go down to, someone, in South Shore, and you ask them what's safety, and they would almost say the same thing, but one area gets to have it and another area doesn't. And I think that is for us to start putting that sort of pressure on a broad level, and I think people will relate to it. It might not get everybody, but I think it will move people because they know, everyone knows what it means to have safety. It's not going to involve police or blue lights or closed caption television. When they close their eyes, it's going to be like a family member or a birthday or that teacher. And I think that's something for us to tap into. So I'm rambling. I was born deaf with a speech impediment. So the moment I get a chance to talk, I'm going to just talk, you know? So.
No, I appreciate that. And Sharon, feel free to offer some thoughts on that question, or either of you in general.
I'll just say that, oftentimes people say that we don't invest enough in communities, that we don't invest in Black and brown communities that are struggling. And I always cringe when I hear that, because we actually do invest in these communities. We just invest in these communities through prisons and jails and salaries for officers and salaries for prison guards and probation officers. And, there can be a debate about whether we need those things or not. But the fact of the matter is the way we currently fund them doesn't work. It doesn't work for safety. And we invest in policies like money bond that makes us feel good, I guess, but doesn't actually make us safer. So we want to take resources that are limited, right? We have limited resources to keep us safe. And we want to put them in things that work. And locking people up pre-trial, forcing them to take guilty pleas, sending them down to prison, and then bringing them back home and having basically a noose around their neck of a criminal record hasn't worked. It's an experiment that's failed. And money bond is and pretrial incarceration is one of the biggest pieces of that. So the Senator Peters, how do you, there are people in the chat that sounds like they want to support this. I think we've sold them. I hope we've sold them because we've been rambling. How should folks, what would you say? You're a senator. How can people help?
Yes, I'm glad that you put that on me to do that. That's great. That's my favorite thing. I'm ready for that answer. I mean, ready to answer. Yeah. I think that, people should join an organization in the coalition. I think I come from organizing before this. I think that's utterly important to be part of an organized collective, and to sort of follow that lead. And the other one is, talk to your local rep, or state senator, and both organize with a broader group of people and also put pressure on those who are in office. I think that we hate it when we're in office about getting a lot of pressure. And if we hate it, that generally means it's good, in my opinion. So people will call me and they'll put pressure on me and they'll be like, I need an answer. And I will get mad. I don't get mad to the person. I'll just be mad internally. And that's a good thing, because if I'm not getting that call, I'm just kind of going by in life. I just skate by in life. And I think that's something that's very important. I think people are asking about specific bill number. And so I'll just say that we don't have a specific bill number for this. I think the Pretrial Fairness Act, I think is sort of something that you can talk to someone like myself, someone in office. So I think it's both working with an organization and talking to folks about supporting Pretrial Fairness Act and explaining to them that person in office in detail and getting more people involved. So that's just me answering. Am I answering everything that everybody wanted here? This is great. Yeah. I'm killing it this Thursday. I want you to know this, everybody. This is great. I'm clearly on top of it. I had to do a press conference and I finished it today by saying that's all I've got, which is one of the most eloquent. I'm glad that I have Barack Obama's seat, because I definitely carry that oratory skill. You know what I mean? Yes, thank you. Sharon, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I want to lift up what Senator Peters talked about. Folks know the governor has talked about wanting to end money bond, and Senator Peters is the leader on that. So talking to your representative, say, what are you doing to end money bond, right? They know where to go, right? They know to come to Senator Peters. They know to come to Representative Slaughter. We've got some versions of this out there. So I would say just going to your representatives and saying, what are you doing to end money bond? Are you supportive of Senator Peters and Representative Slaughter's efforts to end money bond, and go from there? And say that Senator Peters at you. I'm joking. We're not gonna get Senator in trouble. But talking about the bill is really, 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 really important. And talking to your representatives about ending money bond.
So thank you both for your feedback. We really appreciate it. It sounds like people are really ready to like find out how they can help. So let's just, bring back Malik, and Malik will walk us through how other folks can help out.
Great. So in order for us to pull this off, to pass pretrial justice reform, we're going to need all of you. We need to make it clear that we, the people, want more freedom for our friends and our neighbors. So here's just a few ways you can get involved. But like Senator Peters said, part of us conveying all of this information to you and kind of the nuts and bolts of our current system and what we want to replace it with is that so that you can self-organize as well, so that you can take the knowledge and the information back to whatever your organizing base is and begin to create and create ways to pull people into the work and amplify this issue. But some ways that are already on the books, ways that you can plug in. We are hosting a statewide day of action. This is a call for action on September 26th. That's a Saturday. And so our network has organizations all over the state that are planning to plug into that, and we'll be announcing what those specific actions will be around the state soon. And right now, currently in Cook County, we're going to have a rally at the Cook County Jail on the 26th. More information about that will be forthcoming. And if you're in other parts of the state, you can definitely follow us on social media and go to our website, which I'll get to later, to find out more about specific actions that'll be happening on the 26th. We also have a virtual lobby day coming up on October 17th. So obviously it's really hard and different advocating for policy change in the pandemic, but we can do it and we're going to be creative and make it work. So we're doing a virtual lobby day on October 17th. So we need you to join us and help us talk to legislators about why they should support the Pretrial Fairness Act, about why it's a comprehensive vision, and about why we need to pass it. And if you've never done a lobby day before, that's fine. We'll be having a training ahead of time. So please keep an eye out at our website, inmoneybond.org. You can sign up for our newsletter, follow us on all social media for regular campaign updates and information about those actions and the lobby day that I spoke about. And Corinna, I think, is going to drop the registration link in the chat for the lobby day coming up on the 17th. And one more thing, we are also in the midst of planning a series of town halls, virtual town halls with some of our legislative champions. That's an opportunity for us to kind of build the profile of this issue and speak to people about it and try to win hearts and minds on our side. So again, you can get a hold of us by email at ilnetworkforpretrialjustice@gmail.com. If someone could also drop that in the chat, that'd be helpful. And again, sign up for the newsletter at inmoneybond.org. And sign up for our social media profiles and follow us to get updates. Thank you. We appreciate you all being here. Onward.